And I was talking also about the saltiness and the chalky soil that we have that is giving also this freshness that is very interesting. And moreover, for Clos Lanson, we are doing an extra-brut champagne at 3 grams of sugar. So you always have something that is very lively, dynamic, very fresh and very pure. So 2006 can be very good, but when you check all the different vintages, you can take a lot of pleasure today with 2009, that was very Cellar. 2008, that was such a fresh and mineral year, even if 2008 is still young today.
Hervé Dantan, thank you so much for joining us. I recently tasted a vertical of Clos Lanson, 2006 to 2011. I really loved the 2008 in particular. So I thought we'd start our conversation today talking about your famous Clos. What can you tell me about it? I know it's a hectare.
Yes, this is a very special plot because this is 1 hectare of Chardonnay that is located in the center of France. Very historical plot that was already here more than 2 centuries ago. That was the origin certainly at the edge of the town, but that have been enclosed in the town with what happened after the Second World War. And today we have only 1 hectare of Chardonnay that has been planted in 1962 and 1985. And we are producing a very small quantity of bottles since in keeping with the quality of the vintage, it represents between 5,000 and 8,000 bottles per year and per vintage. So that's a very special plot because this is really what is a spirit of a Clos, because a Clos in Champagne is very rare. And the Clos must always represent a plot that has an history, a plot that has a special location, and a plot that is making a very special wine. And when you think about Clos Lanson, this plot is the part of the history of France, because we are in center of France. We are very close from the cathedral of Reims that we see from our plot. When you're on the plot, you see the cathedral that is at less than 1 kilometer. So that's a very special location. Since we are in town, we have also a microclimate that is very special because even if the vineyard of Montagne de Reims is at 1 kilometer from where we have between 2 and 3 degrees more in temperatures during the season. And it gives a maturity that is always faster than in many places in Champagne, and it gives to the grapes always a very special taste. When you think about the soil, we are completely in a very chalky hill, since we are on a chalky hill that is made with a very friable and pure and white chalk. So the climate is very special, the soil is special, the history is special, and it gives a wine that is also very special because even if it's a Chardonnay, it's not a Chardonnay from Montagne de Reims or Côte des Blancs. It's a kind of Chardonnay from nowhere in Champagne that is giving this balance between the generosity and the saltiness. And I always say that when you taste Clos Lanson, this is a kind of trouble in the plot. The generosity coming from the microclimate that we have in this place, and the saltiness and the freshness coming from the very chalky soil of this very chalky hill that we have in Reims.
And do you think that historically there were other vineyards in that area, or this is just all that's left after the city is expanded, or do you know, or do we know that?
I was talking about the Second World War, but it's more between the First and the Second World War. There were at this place 12 hectares of vineyard. But with the growth of town everywhere in the world, many vineyards have been given up to build new houses or new buildings.
And so tell us a little bit about the winemaking. Are you doing fermentation in the barrels, or how is it made?
It is made by, at first, the vineyard is organic farming. And after, regarding the vinification, this is a classical Lanson vinification, so alcoholic fermentation and no malolactic fermentation. What is less classic at Lanson is that the wine of Clos Lanson is fermented in barrels. So this is 100% fermented in barrels.
And so when you're making this wine, you as a cellar master at Lanson, you're a master blender. And when you're making a wine like this, where it's from 1 hectare, one variety, one vintage, how is that difference? Is it a balancing act to express the vintage but keep the Maison Lanson style?
It's a very different wine if you compare with all what we do at Lanson, because this is a very special exercise. At Lanson, we are blending different plots coming from different villages, also with multi-vintage, many different vintages. But for Clos Lanson, it's coming from only one plot, and we make a vintage every year. So that's something that is completely different. This is a very unique and very qualitative plot where it's always possible to do something that is very good, because it's like a garden for us. We have only 1 hectare. It is located on the winery. So we see this plot every day, so we can control every day during the vegetative season the level of growth. We can check if we have disease. Regarding the maturity of the grapes, we see this plot twice a day, so everything is easier. And since it's a garden, we can select a lot to take the best of the best. And because we are in town, because we have this microclimate, we always manage to have, I was talking about fast maturity, but at first a very good maturity, even when the vintage can be a little bit complicated. So we take always our time to have the right level of maturity to be able to have a vintage every year. So on the last decades, so since 2006, we have been made a vintage of Clos Lanson every year, even if the quantity in some vintage was very small.
So if you were going to open a bottle today now, which vintage would you suggest people should open?
Yes, I say all of them because you know it. At Lanson, we are famous for our method of vinification. For our vintage, we are blocking malolactic fermentation, so we have always higher level of freshness. That is very interesting for young wines, but also for older wines, because it will guarantee always very long ability for aging. So if you taste a 2006 today, it will be very well matured, but you will see in the final, you have the freshness of Lanson that is here. And I was talking also about the saltiness and the chalky soil that we have, that is giving also this freshness that is very interesting. And moreover, for Clos Lanson, we are doing an extra-brut champagne at 3 grams of sugar. So you always have something that is very lively, dynamic, very fresh and very pure. So 2006 can be very good, but when you check all the different vintages, you can take a lot of pleasure today with 2009, that was very Cellar. 2008, that was such a fresh and mineral year, even if 2008 is still young today. And 2010, that is maybe an underrated vintage. Today is a great wine to taste, because it's a Clos Lanson that is looking like a Burgundy wine with a great Chardonnay, where you have this delicacy of the year with the aging that gave some very soft and delicate vanilla flavors that is coming from the aging in barrels, but that are very, very interesting. And 2011, that is coming on the market, is also very interesting because it was a very warm vintage with early harvest, and you have something that is very generous. So every vintage have really a strong personality. The personality of the Clos, but each time the personality of the vintage that is there.
And do you ever, with any of your other wines, allow a small amount of malolactic fermentation in the blend, or no?
Yes, for all the vintages that we make. So if you see the range of Lanson wines, you have the vintage. Today it's 2014. You have Noble 2012, Noble Blanc de Blanc 2008, and Clos Lanson, non-malolactic at all, because they are coming from great vintage. We are waiting them at least 10 years in our cellar, so we know that the freshness will be tame and balanced by the aging. For multi-vintage champagne like Black Creation, Rosé Creation, Blanc de Blanc, Black Reserve, and bio-organic champagne, we can use a small amount of malolactic fermentation. Generally, it's around 25% of malolactic wines that we are blending with non-malolactic. The idea is to keep the freshness with multi-vintage champagne, but by adding few percentage of malolactic wines.
Just for a little bit of creaminess, or is that the idea? Yeah.
Exactly, yes. Some creaminess, and to have also different flavors. We are not playing only with the flavors of non-malolactic universe, but we are playing also with some flavors that you have with malolactic wine, so some more biscuit.
A little bit of pastry, a little brioche in there?
A pastry's note. Yes, brioche notes, exactly.
So why do you've had a long and successful career in Champagne. Why do you think that there has been this growth in single vineyard, this interest in single vineyard champagnes, fairly small productions? That didn't exist even 50 years ago.
Yes, even if everybody in Champagne knew we all knew that in our library of plots or wines we had in the winery, we had some very special wines, but sure that it was not really successful maybe 20 years ago to say I will do a plot vinification with only one plot, because Champagne was famous to blend different wines by knowing that sometime the blend of two plots was superior of the tasting of the two plots taken separately. The result is always better when you blend. So it's something new, I would say, that must be done. I think when the plot deserves to be vinified separately, and when you have something that is very special, when you have a wine that is not in a standard taste, but where you have something that is very special. It can be strong generosity, strong freshness, strong saltiness, and I think it's not made for every wine, because in many occasions I think it will continue to be the most important style of champagne. It is better to blend many different ingredients, and we know that by blending different wines that have different qualities, we'll have a superior result, because we'll take some wines with very good freshness, some wines with a lot of delicacy, some wines with richness, and the result will be to have something that will be very complex.
Okay, so it's only for an exceptional situation. Okay, so this brings me actually to your job as a cellar master. I would love to hear more about your work and the changes you've made since you've been at Lanson. I think you arrived in 2013. I read that you've done some work with the reserve wines. Could you tell us just a little bit about that?
Yes, I've been very lucky when I joined Lanson in 2013, because many investments have been done in the company. Regarding the vineyard, by investing in organic biodynamic vineyard. Regarding also the winery, since Lanson invested in new facilities to increase our ability to do plot vinification with small vats that have been bought, and also a new winery with oak casks and barrels for the aging of reserve wine. So since then, we increased a lot our library of reserve wine. Since now we keep keeping with years, but between 15 and 20 different vintages as a still wine that we keep in concrete tanks or stainless steel vats or oak casks. And we created also some reserve perpetuel that we keep also in oak casks to increase our ability to do something that is always more complex for multi-vintage champagne. And we introduced also, that's what you said before, a small amount of malolactic fermentation. The idea was not to change the style, but because we want to keep this very fresh style of Lanson with wines that are always giving a very refreshing, very delicate style. But it was with this small amount of malolactic fermentation to have another kind of wine that was interesting, to give new flavors, new dimension, new texture in the mouth.
So that seems to be, that's got to be an immense part of your responsibilities, those reserve wines.
Yes, this is a fantastic library to keep, to be able to have so many reserve wines. At first, we always keep Grand Cru and Premier Cru. So when I talk about, for example, 2003, it can be Ménil-sur-Oger 2003, 2005 it can be Bouzy 2005, 2008 it can be Verzenay Pinot Noir 2008. So each time we have Grand Cru and Premier Cru. And at first it's very interesting exercise of memory, because every year we taste all the reserve wine at this time. Generally, it's just after the harvest to evaluate their level of quality, their level of aging, and it's always interesting to dip in their qualities and to remember what happened at this time and to see what are their quality. And when we begin to blend beginning of January, between January and March, it's always so interesting to have many reserve wine where you will have different taste, level of freshness, different flavors, different level of evolution. And when you really know the quality of your harvest that you tasted also many times your still wines of the last harvest, and when you know the quality of the reserve wine, you are ready to say, with my recent harvest, maybe I will need to blend this vintage or this vintage to balance the freshness, balance the richness, balance the delicacy. And it's always more interesting when you have 10, 15, 20 vintage than when you have only one or two. I often say it's like when you are in your kitchen. If you are in your kitchen and that you have only butter and salt, it will be complicated to cook. But if you know that you have many different ingredients, maybe you will not use everything, but will be happy to have some of them to compose a kind of symphony with many different things that you will be able to balance.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy. Actually, I was just thinking that it's like a composition. It is very much a composition. Thank you for joining us for part 1 of our podcast with Hervé Dantan. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll tune in for part 2. In the meantime, I have a special deal for you. This podcast is produced in partnership with Wine Voices from Wine Searcher, the world's largest wine and spirits database. Get 10% off a 12-month Wine Searcher Pro subscription with the code JaneWS at checkout. That's JaneWS. Follow the link in the description to get started.